Self. You should like written something down. Then like
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Hope in the Light of Suicide. My name is Tammy White. I'm your host, and this is Bonnie Snyder, our co-host. And I'm also the founder of the Bobby White Foundation. And we're bringing you this show. It's a very important time in our world right now, and Bonnie and I feel it's really important that we share our story, and we kind of, like the title says, kind of bring light to this really dark subject. I'm also the founder of the Bobby White Foundation, and our mission, as with this show, is to bring awareness, support, and prevention to the suicide crisis in our country. Actually, it's all around the world now. So that's what we're here for. The show is meant to be a little more upbeat. We're going to have really sad times, and we may be crying sometimes. Our producer said we needed to get Kleenex as a sponsor, which may be real at times. So anyways, so we hope you stay with us, and our program helps you in some way. So I'm going to introduce Bonnie. Bonnie's my friend I met a couple of years ago. Because of our shared experience with the foundation, I started going to some meetings within our community of different organizations that were starting to come together to help with the mental health crisis in our community. And that's where I met Bonnie. And Bonnie, unfortunately, has had 2 losses, and I'll let her introduce herself, and you get to know who she is.
Thank you, Tammy. As Tammy said, I'm Bonnie Snyder, and I had the privilege and pleasure of first meeting Tammy as a colleague, but it quickly morphed into this closeness, this friendship that we share through our common experience. And, I'm blessed to have her as a friend and honored to be co-hosting this show with her. Like Tammy said, the purpose of the show is to discuss the issue of suicide. As a mental health professional, it's a topic that I was always aware of in my work, but became extremely personal with the losses of my grandson and then his uncle, my youngest son, nearly almost 6 months to the day later. And, like Tammy said, we hope that you stick with us through this process as we bring not only awareness, but share our stories and the stories of others as we highlight, this extremely important topic.
Tell us about your grandson.
Oh, my grandson. February 7th, 2005. Was one of the most joyous days of my life. My oldest son and his then wife, Kira, had given birth to their youngest child, Aiden. Aiden Michael, and he was, I just remember when he was born, he had this tuft of blonde hair and these bright blue eyes. And I'm looking at him like, where did the blue eyes come from? And then it dawned on me, when his mom has green eyes. And so, I always thought the blue eyes was a mixture between, his mom and his dad. But, he was the sweetest little I just remember looking at him and, how he used to follow me around and watching him grow up to the remarkable young man that he was. He turned 14 on February 7th of 2019. 7 days later, on Valentine's Day, I, began the nightmare. I was walking into one of the schools that I work in, when I do my, doing my work. And my son, my oldest son, Carl, he called me. And I was, thinking to myself, wow, it's Valentine's Day. Carl was calling his mom for
Right.
Valentine's Day because he never calls his mother. So I just remember the conversation started with, Mom, do you have Aiden's number? And I think so. And he told me, Kira, Aiden's mom, Kira just found him in the closet. He's going to want to talk to you. Again, being a mental health professional, whenever, someone is in crisis or, something to talk about, they're like, call Nana or call
Right.
Mom or, call, Aunt Bonnie. And so, I told my son, I said, yeah, I'm at work. But yeah, I'll look it up, and I'm on my way to Kira's house now. I want to say it was roughly 20 minutes later. I was standing in my classroom, my phone rang again, and, hang on, I need to take this call. And as I'm walking out of the classroom to take the call in private, I heard the words that I, no parent should have to hear, no grandparent should ever have to hear. And he just said, Mom, he's gone. Aiden is dead. And I just recall letting out this blood-curdling scream like, no. And it's not that I didn't, I think for a moment I was like not aware or conscious of where I was. I
Right.
was at work, and I felt bad because I think I frightened, my student, I was with a bunch of sixth graders. And all they knew was like, what is wrong with Miss
something.
Bonnie?
Yeah.
Something is wrong. So a couple of teachers from adjoining classrooms came over because they thought my children were unruly. And I just remember being able to whisper in, the teacher that I shared the classroom with, whispered in her ear, oh my gosh, my grandson just, back then we used the language committed suicide.
Right.
And, so they realized what was going on and, kind of got me shuffled. And, as I'm talking to my son, here it is, my oldest child who, I refer to him often as my voice of reason, strongest individual that I ever, I'm honored to be his mother. But I remember him saying to me, Mom, for the first time in my life, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And, of course, my mind immediately went to Kira, Aiden's mom.
Right.
Because she was the one who found him.
She's the one who found him. Yeah.
He had died by suicide by hanging himself in his closet. And, I just remember, for the first several hours, Kira wanted to talk to Noah, and then finally, she called. And, we would talk, and, she was like, obviously, like, how do you respond to finding, then her youngest, your
Right.
youngest child
How do you
gone?
process it?
Yeah, it was, and I just kept telling her, okay, I'm coming. They live in Missouri, I'll be there. And, as I'm driving, periodically my son would call me, and I'm listening to the process of, the police officers, roping off the scene, the medical examiner, the picture taken, I'm retired military police, and, and so my brain is processing in like several different through several different lenses, I would say. The military police officer side of me that is, envisioning this scene. The mental health professional, side of me that is envisioning what, the family was going through, in that, not only, did Kira just find her son, but, because she and Carl are divorced now, they did not tell Carl on his drive from his home to hers that Aiden was gone. And so he did
Yeah.
not find out until he got to the house. Now we're going to tell him that his youngest child is gone.
At that point, when he got there, was the area roped off?
I don't
In
think so
addition-
because he didn't, but then again, I'm not sure.
Right.
All I know is it's about a 15, 20-minute drive between his home and her home. And within that 20-minute span, he called and,
Right.
told me he was gone. And I remember, the things that stood out to me the most was processing to myself, my beautiful blonde-haired, blue-eyed baby
Yeah.
is gone. And, again, trying to process, like, what was going, what happened? Like, what would have caused him.
What would have triggered
Yes.
something so
Exactly.
severe?
And then I remember, Carl telling me, as they were taking his, body from the home, home to the funeral parlor, Carl said, "I want to see my son." And the detective looked at him and said, "I don't think that's possible." And Carl said his comment was, "I don't think you understand. That was not a question." And I'm like, and I'm thinking to myself, like, okay. And I'm, of course I'm processing what is going on. And then, the detective, is like, okay. And so, thankfully the medical examiner told him, it was okay.
Mhm.
And, or, gave the go ahead. And so Carl was able to see Aiden before they took him from home, to
Right.
the medical examiner's office. And, I just remember as I'm listening to Carl tell me, I'm looking at, my child who did not look like my child, and at the moment. And, and I'm like, okay, I'm on my way. I will be there. I'm on my way. And, we took made the drive to go to Aiden's service. But unfortunately, I got into little town of Cadiz, Kentucky. I'm coming from Florida where it's, 80-degree weather. I'm going
Right.
to Kansas where it's 40-degree weather. And we got into Cadiz, Kentucky and hit a patch of black ice. And unfortunately, hitting this black ice, it was myself, my daughter, my youngest son, Patrick, and four of the children, three of my daughter's children, and then Patrick's youngest.
Right.
Car rolled about 4 times,
Oh my God.
and I'm thinking to myself, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to Kansas for this service,
Right.
and we're now in a rollover crash. Now, thankfully, with some help of some amazing people in that little town, there was, and we were remiss if I didn't name them. There was like, then one of the nurses, her name was Brandy. Brandy, called her mom and another friend who, worked in the hospital, and they were like, we've got to help this family. And so Brandy's mom, Sue, was like, here's my credit card. I'm out of town, so I couldn't rent a car. So I was like, I don't do credit cards. So I'm like, but this is an emergency. Like, can you make an exception?
Yeah.
I mean, I'll pay cash for the card. Let me have it. But, Sue was like, here's my credit card. Go, we'll rent you the car so you can get, to where you need to go. Amanda, she and her church, put us in a hotel for the night. They bought us food. Well, anyway, we ended up making it to this in time for the service, but we did not make it for the family viewing. And so Aiden, the wishes
Mhm.
were, for Aiden to be cremated.
Right.
So I never really got to see him before, his cremation.
Right.
And so, like, I've left her pictures. I moved here to Florida when he was 4.
Right. Do you think that if you saw him, it would give you closure, or do you think it's better that you didn't see him?
As a mental health professional,
Here we go.
there is something about that word closure.
Yeah.
We hear it so often.
Right.
What do you need for closure? And
And you never really you never have that in this situation. That's just it.
what's
You
funny?
never do.
What's funny, Tammy, is I don't think people realize that.
Yeah.
But in this process, as my brain is going through the, this process of, okay, there's a grief cycle. We talk about the grief cycle,
Right,
in mental
right,
health,
yeah.
and trying to compartmentalize. We've got this, situation. We've got this. It's my family. So how do I put all of these, pieces into place? And this word closure,
Right.
and you hit a nail right on the head. What is, I think up until that point, a lot of my training, or I should say a lot, but portions of my training, I'm going to say,
Right.
kind of what I'm, closure. Like, that's the stupidest thing ever. Like, what is this thing called closure? But I think it was an at the moment, kind of thing, in terms of, all right, let me pull, all of my years of experience into this moment. For nothing else, for the family, not only for the family, but for myself, because
Right.
now, again, we're dealing with the trauma of Aiden's death, but now the trauma of being in a crash. And, frantically, are we going to make it for the service?
Right.
And like I said, thankfully we did. And I think, we, as we,
That's just trauma after trauma in
It is.
one short
It
loop.
and I want to say in this, as we go through this process, we will, talk about, the grief cycle
Right.
and what is this thing called closure?
Right.
And do people who have had our experiences, do we experience closure? I think it's important that we recognize that the grief cycle itself and closure, what closure looks like, is different for everybody.
And the grief cycle is going to be different for
it
everybody.
is. I mean, some people.
They have it like you got this step, then this step, and you go through this, then you go through this, and you go through that. Well, you may end up backtracking.
Exactly.
It's not a linear or whatever thing. You just don't go through it automatically.
Exactly. I mean, and you're so right. I mean, some people think, well, I've gone through step one,
Yeah.
and now I'm in step two, and I'll never go back to step one. And I think people don't realize that I could be in step 5. There's two schools of thought. There's a
Right.
five grief cycle, or 5-phase grief cycle, and a 7.
And a 7,
I like
yeah.
the 5, just because, when you look at the 7, oh, this step and this step really belongs here. But like I said, my preference is the 5. And a lot of people don't realize I could be getting ready to crest into 5 and head right back over here.
Oh, exactly.
And people don't understand that.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true.
So-
I'm sure we both have done that several times.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Several times you think, oh yeah, I'm here, I'm good, I'm doing better, and it may be the smallest thing, and it may be nothing
Yes.
that'll send you back, and then it's hard for people to understand that have not experienced this horrific thing.
Correct.
You know?
Absolutely.
It really is.
Absolutely.
So how is your daughter-in-law and son doing now? And they had other children, right?
Yes. Aiden was the youngest of 3. Carl and Kira had 3 children together. Raven, who was their oldest daughter, Trent, their middle son, and then Aiden was the baby. They have, the 2 other children, and how the family is processing it. I'm blessed to have an amazingly blended family, because, both Kira and Carl have remarried. And you would, like I said, we're one big, giant, again,
Oh,
blended
that's good,
family.
yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's amazing. And everybody in the family has processed the loss in different ways.
Yep.
Aiden's, and I know you asked about, Carl and Kira.
Well, the children too. I mean, this
And I
is
think,
a huge...
and I think it's important because Raven, the oldest, my granddaughter, she has had her struggles with suicide attempts, and thankfully, no completions. Where she's at in the process right now, she's, I want to say, right in the grip of the anger stage,
Mhm.
and she is angry with her brother. to the, you'll hear her say sometimes, "I hate you, Aiden. I hate you." And, I think that, you would find some people that would question that. But it's, of course, we understand why
Right.
she's there. What she's
There were
brought-
times that I'd walk through my yard and I'd be cussing out my husband. It's like,
Exactly. Trent, he has, and again, we talk about this mental health link between, suicide and mental health, and in the throes of that is, substance misuse. And so, there were some episodes of substance misuse with the middle child, with Trenton. His name is Trent. I nicknamed him Trenton. His father's like, "No, Trenton." I was like, Kira and I were going to do the birth certificate so we could put Trenton, but somehow or another Carl beat us to it. It became Trent. But anyway, a little aside there. Trent has had some, issues with, substance use. I was actually happy that he was able to come here in July after his graduation, and we had, a really good talk. And, some of the things he shared with me was, and I was like, you know what, this is normal. You're fine. I
Right.
mean, don't let anybody, of course, I don't agree with the substance use.
Well, yeah.
But at the same time, I understand what you're,
what
you're
he's
going
what
through.
he's going through. Well,
Exactly.
and statistically, suicide loss survivors are at a much greater risk for suicide than the
Yes.
general public.
Exactly.
I mean, it's like 400 times or something. I mean, it's astronomical.
It is.
And it's, imagine it's hard enough for kids these days without something like this, and then dealing with something like this, their own sibling. It's difficult. I know it's difficult for my my sister-in-laws and my brother-in-law, and they're adults.
Right.
Imagine putting this into a teenage brain.
Yes. Yes.
And
And Kira, she has her ups and downs. She has become very involved with, organizations and foundations, in Missouri, to highlight, the epidemic, of suicide. Unfortunately, after Aiden, there were, I want to say, at least 2 other students in his circle of friends, in his class, in his cohort, that completed suicide.
oh man.
And, so it's in a lot of ways, for her, it was reliving Aiden all over
Well,
again.
and that lost survivors aren't just family. It's friends, coworkers. I mean, unfortunately, when something like this happens, it's just a wave, a ripple effect, and it can affect hundreds of people in that person's circle.
Yes. And, and I think that's something that a lot of people don't realize, when I think of, using Aiden as an example, again, not only was the family, but his school. What the administrators of his school did, after, his passing, stayed connected, with us, who's the point of contact. They, cleaned out his locker for us, so we didn't have
So
to
you
do
didn't
it.
have to, yeah.
He was on an archery team, and his archery team, like, he literally had just competed in a tournament. Like, I want to say it was 3 days before, his death. And the archery team had made this beautiful wreath that had, his arrows, the arrows from his, is it the quill? Yeah, I don't
Yeah, I think that's what it's
What is that?
I used to do archery too when I was in Campfire Girls when I was a kid.
Gotcha. But, they, like I said, they
But,
did
yeah.
this really beautiful
Oh, that's
wreath
cool.
with his arrows on it, and they had his score sheet in it. But I want to say they made the score sheet to look as if, he scored like a perfect score.
Right.
But, it just melted my heart. And then, on the school grounds is like a memorial garden where his classmates had painted rocks with his name on it, not only, to immemorial, memory of him, but in, there are other classmates
The
that
other
have
students
lost.
too,
Yes. Yeah.
Well, that's good because then it gives the students a place to go and help them grieve.
Exactly. Exactly.
And you mentioned, unfortunately, 6 months later?
It's almost 6 months to the day. My youngest son, Patrick, he and I had, we'd actually driven to Kansas, see his brother, see his, and we, come back. I'd gone to New Jersey, I'm, from Jersey, as you know, but I went to New Jersey for my high school reunion, and Patrick, his youngest son, was spending the weekend with, my daughter, his aunt. He loved spending time with his cousins. And it was that Saturday before I came back home, and I was going to fly home that Monday. It was that Saturday or Sunday, my daughter called me, "Mom, have you heard from your son?" And I was like, "You mean your brother?" And I said, "No, I hadn't." And, she says, "Well, school starts Monday." It's the first day of school was
Right.
Monday. School starts Monday. And he hasn't come to pick up Devin. And, this is kind of unusual. Patrick, like I said, he's had custody of Devin since Devin was 11 months old.
Mm-hmm.
And so I, said, "Well, I don't want you to drive. It's like an hour drive between my daughter's house and ours. Patrick lived at home." And I said, "Well, I don't want you to bring Devin home if he's not there. If he misses the first day of school, so be it. I'll be home tomorrow." And so we posted a Facebook page, "Hey, has anybody seen Patrick? Like, this is not like him not to call anybody." We called his job. He did not go to work. That was not like Patrick. I mean, he had a very strong work ethic. And so I landed, I got back home that Monday morning, and I had this feeling, this like feeling of dread. Do you know, like if you go, I love horror movies. I don't scare easy, but
not me. I'm the opposite.
so that feeling you get in your stomach when it's like the trauma is about to hit. Well, I had that feeling in my stomach as I walked in the house, and I'm like, please, God, please do not let me find him in his room. And so I walked around the corner, and he's not in his bedroom, and I'm like, "All right, Patrick, where are you?" Anyway, long story short, I ended up calling the sheriff's department. I can't find my son. And, I explained, I've been in New Jersey for the weekend. Like we were together for the last week. He hasn't called me. He hasn't called his son. He did not go to work. This is not unusual. And again, that military police brain, do I have to wait 24 hours for you guys to do anything? And the officer said, no. There were, enough variables to, we'll start looking, weren't looking into this. So as we, so he starts calling this hospital, I'm calling this hospital. He's looking in, at the databases to see, maybe he's in jail, did he get jail? Like, is he in jail? What's going on? And so as I was going in the house, I see another police car pull up. And I looked at the officer and I said, "Is he coming here for you?" And he goes, "Oh, that's my supervisor." He goes, "Let me talk to him for a bit. We'll come in and talk to you." So I said, "Okay." Right. So I go in the house, and I wasn't in the house maybe 5 minutes. And the deputy and his supervisor walk in, and these words are seared in my brain. "Bonnie, we found your son. He's deceased."
Oh, my God.
And I'm looking at him like,
and just so matter of fact.
Did I just hear what you just said? And he then gives me this piece of paper, and he goes, "The medical examiner's been trying to get a hold of you. No one knew where you were. You need to call him." Now, I'm going to concede that how it's sounding or how you can hear me saying it was not the cold delivery from the officer. But again, my brain was, "Bonnie, we found your son. He's deceased." So I remember calling the medical examiner, and he is like, "Oh yeah, no, we have him. Yeah, I've done the autopsy. You just need to tell me where to send the body."
And
so I'm thinking to myself, how do you do an autopsy without notifying a next of kin first. Like, so, and they were like, oh, because of the circumstances of his death, we're authorized to just go ahead and do an autopsy. And of course, my brain is like,
And at this time, you don't know the circumstances.
I didn't
of
know
it.
the circumstances.
Yeah.
And so finally, as the officers were talking to me, they had asked, was I aware, did I know if Patrick had any substance, use issues? And I'm like, yes, there have been some struggles, with him going on. I was, later to find out from the autopsy that he died from from meth and morphine overdose. He overdosed on meth and morphine. And I'm thinking to myself, where'd the meth come from? Where'd the morphine come from? And at that point, the hardest phone call I had to make was to Carl.
Oh, yeah.
In which I said, son, I hate to do this to you, but I need you to come to Florida. Your little brother is gone. And I want to say 6 months to the day, we lost Aiden on February 14th. We lost Patrick on August 11th. And so Carl, he, it took him a minute to process. And I just remember him calling me like later on in the day, and he's like frantic and he's crying, like, Mom, because he and his wife, that's Patrick and Aiden, and his wife, her name is Joy. Joy. They had just had their baby on August 9th.
Oh, wow.
So 2
Yeah.
days before Patrick's death, we're welcoming,
A new baby
life into the family. And they were in Oklahoma, because the baby was born in Oklahoma. They're in Oklahoma with the doctor. And he's like, and I'm like, Carl, I understand. You guys just had the baby. I understand, it's okay. And he goes, but Mom, I should be there with you. And I said, son, and then it's like, how do I ask, his current wife, Joy,
Mm-hmm.
You just had a baby 2 days ago. I want you to come
I
to
need my
Kansas.
son.
Well, that's what I need, my
Yeah.
son, but it was also, having her, Carl, and a newborn
Right.
coming from Kansas, or Missouri
Right.
to Florida. And so it was like, all right, we'll do this. It's like, she felt really bad, like, I don't know if I could travel right now. And I'm
Right.
thinking, you just gave birth.
Yeah, really.
So, she, was like, she's, crying, like, I want to be there, Mama. I need to be there for you. And I was like, it's okay. I understand. So, she stayed with her mom, with her family. And then Carl, and his two of his, Carl has 5 children. 6, counting Aiden, and then the new baby.
Mm-hmm.
So Carl and, 2 of his children came, to Florida for, Patrick's service. And with Patrick, his death was ruled an accidental overdose. He dealt with so much depression. And a lot of the depression came from, he has 2 younger children, from a relationship
Mm-hmm.
here. And I don't want to bash Florida. I love this. I mean, I love living here. I love, my new home state. But he did not have rights to the 2 younger children
Mm-hmm.
because he and the mother of those 2 children were not married. And so and I don't want to seem like I'm bashing her per se, but he could not demand, I want to see my children.
Right.
And so, he missed being able to spend time with his children. The relationship went south. And so that led to the depression. I want to say, that relationship going south, along with a relationship that he was in right before he died, she just left and went back to Kansas and told him the day she was leaving. This is somebody he'd known for 17 years.
Oh, wow.
By the way, I'm going back. But I'm getting off to an aside. Nevertheless, the substances, and I remember talking to him one day, this was about a month or so before he died. Said, let me get you somebody to talk to. I don't need anybody, Mom. I can talk to you. son, let me get you somebody to talk to. And he repeated. And this is, I want to say, a blessing and a curse of being a mental health professional.
Right.
Because I remember looking at him saying, I'm your mom. I can't be your therapist.
Yeah, your mom first.
But his back, his, what's the word I'm looking for? His back talk to me was one of, Mom, you have more degrees than a circle. Who are you going to find for me to talk to that is more educated than you? And I'm thinking to myself, I can't argue with this, But in my head, of course, that mental health professional
Right.
side of me, and as you know, if someone does not want professional help, we can't force them to professional
No.
help. So all right, we'll do this. And my plan was, when I came back from New Jersey, was, all right, son, let's get you into help. Devin, his son was going to go to my daughter to go to school with his cousins, and we were going to talk Patrick into going into rehab. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. But I remember him saying to me once, I feel as everybody is talking about me, but no one is talking to me. And where, that has resonated with me through, now the year and a half that he's been gone.
Right.
Because it makes me think about, was it an accidental overdose? Or was he so depressed that it was a suicide completion masked
Right.
by an overdose?
And, that happens so often. And those statistics aren't in with the suicide statistics.
Correct.
So you said his death was ruled an accidental overdose.
Correct.
But more than likely, it was, like you said, a suicide covered up.
I remember doing an interview for Fox, and Evan Axelbank asked me a question. And I always tell people, and he's amazing, he's an amazing guy. This way he did the story was, I'm just blown away by it. But he told me, he says, I want to ask you a question. And I said, okay. And he goes, but I want you, I want you to understand, before I ask the question, it's my brain is processing. And he looked at me and he said, you are a mental health professional. How did this happen to you? And when I tell people that Evan asked me that question, some of the response that I get is, that was so rude of him. To which I said, no, I need you to understand the reason Evan asked the question, because it is a question and a point that needs to be made. As a mental health professional, to deal with not only a death by suicide of my grandson, but and for the sake of this conversation, an accidental overdose with my son. Suicide, mental health, and substance use disorder does not discriminate. It is not just a low socioeconomical, this class of people, this type of person, type of epidemic. It affects everybody.
Everybody.
It has no boundaries.
Yeah, and I have said that since the death of my husband. Your grandson was 14.
Right.
Patrick was
33.
My husband was 62.
And speaking of that, tell us about Bobby. I mean, but tell it. I've heard your story. Of course, I've heard your story, but tell us about
I like listening
Bobby.
to you.
But
I know. Yeah, and that's it's the whole reason for this. Really, this is why this started, is because of my husband Bobby. That's the name of the foundation. He was the kind of guy that he'd rather sit in the background and just let me do what I have to do, with my regular business, with the art business, and he was like Mr. Tammy, whatever. But now he's front and center, and I tell him, I said, if you wouldn't have done this, then you wouldn't have to worry about it. But yeah, we met over 30 years ago. I mean, 33 years ago. He was my rock. He was from Long Island, New York. Tall, dark hair, beautiful blue eyes. He was just so handsome. And from the day we were together, I mean, we were together for nearly 30 years. He was diagnosed with MS in 1991. He was in his late 30s. We were living in Fort Lauderdale at the time, and our plans were to move from there. And at the time, we hadn't decided whether we're going to move to Newport Richey because his family was here, or he loved to cook and barbecue. Yeah, that's him. So, or my family's all out west in Washington and Oregon, and so when he was diagnosed with MS, I made the decision that, I don't think it was going to be fair to move him all the way across country with this new diagnosis. And at the time, we didn't know what road it was going to take, because MS affects everybody differently. And so we ended up moving here to Newport Richey in 91, and I started my business in 94. So we spent the next almost 30 years, building a life and a business. And this was our home. And ironically, prior to us moving here, each one of us at, different times in our life before we met each other, we moved like every year. I mean, and it was weird. And at one point, even in Fort Lauderdale, before we even knew each other, we only lived blocks away from each other. So this moving to Newport Richey, this is the longest time we ever stayed in one place. So this was, this was our home. And anybody that knew Bobby, his friends and his family, you never would have really expected this. Like I said, he did have MS, but he was a land surveyor, and he worked up until the day he died. We had no note. The night before his death, a friend of ours was over at the house, and he wanted us to. He had found out about this show, The Ranch, with Sam Elliott, and Sam Elliott.
It is Sam Elliott.
So we had a really great time. We sat around. We were, drinking beer, binge watching The Ranch. The next day, Friday, it was his day off. And typically he would spend it with his friends. He had a couple of friends from New York who had moved here. And he was actually supposed to have lunch with one of them that day. And something broke on the door of our truck. And I wanted him to take it down to the auto body shop to get it fixed. Well, I was at a meeting. Well, he didn't do it. So I was a little bit perturbed, but I was like, no biggie. I got an errand to run. And it was a surprise for him, actually. So I took the truck down, and they had to weld something on the door. And on my way home, I stopped at the camera store because I had taken our DVD, or our VHS of our wedding. That's how long ago it was.
Right.
And was having it transferred to a DVD. So I stopped and picked that up. I was gone for 2 hours. And I came home, and the front door was closed, which was kind of weird. And I came in the house and put the stuff on the counter, and I thought, no, he's probably sleeping. Because unfortunately, he had been drinking heavily, kind of like continued from the night before, and started that morning. And I could tell before I left, and we kind of had a few words about it, and it's like, whatever. And so I just figured he had gone in and laid down and taken a nap. And I go in our bedroom, and it's really super dark. Can't tell if he's in there or not. I feel the bed, and he's not there. So I go out back and to our back living room, and the first thing I saw was the ladder in the backyard. The back door was open. We had a kitty gate where the sliding glass door was to keep our cats in, and I jumped over that and ran out there and found him hanging from the tree in our backyard. And one of the reasons that we even moved to that house, I remember the day that my brother-in-law took us there. When we were looking for places to live, my father-in-law would only take us to this area, Golden Acres, because you have to, you have an acre land. And we drove by this property half a dozen times, and I'm like, there's no way we can afford that, And finally one day my brother-in-law just pulled in, and it had a small cottage and the main house and a workshop out back, and I thought, this would be really great for my business. Because at the time, we didn't know if Bobby was going to be able to go back to work. Well, we walked in between the house and the cottage, and in the backyard, we have these ginormous century oak trees. I mean, gorgeous. And Bobby's eyes just got huge. And I was like, oh, no. I'm like, okay, I'll make the phone call. And 30 days later, April 1st, we were moved in.
Oh, wow.
We got married in the backyard. There's a small lake back there. We got married back there, and he took his life using one of those trees.
So, Tammy, let me ask you. You still live in the house.
I do.
How is that for you? Like, I think I asked this question because for me, I process if I would have found Patrick in his bedroom,
Right.
could I still be in the house?
For a lot of people, they can't. My mom, her initial instinct and immediately said to me to sell the house and move back to Washington with her. And there was kind of two reasons for that, because I actually lost my dad 5 weeks earlier.
Okay.
He had fallen and broken his back, and he didn't recover from that. And I was supposed to go out to stay with my mom for a couple weeks until this happened. And I've stayed. And I told my mom, I left Washington in 1979, right after high school. And Bobby and I, at that time, he passed away in April 8th of 2016. And April 1st was our 25th anniversary of living in that house. And to me, it's home.
Yes.
And we had a lot of really good memories there. We kind of started to grow old together there. I was in my late 20s when we moved here. He was in his mid-late 30s. And like I said, he was 62 when he took his life. We got married there, had holidays, just a lot of stuff. And to me, I can't let one bad day, one bad decision that he made take away all that. And I actually feel better being there than I would not. I'm afraid that, to me, I would be leaving him behind. That's how I feel.
Now, looking at the expression on my face.
I know.
Well, because
it was so much a part of him.
Yes.
And especially, like I said, he was a land surveyor, and he loved the outdoors. They showed him barbecuing. He had like 4 smokers in our backyard, and we had a fire pit. That was just, him. He loved, playing out in our yard, messing around with our trees, just doing everything. It would take him almost 2 days to completely do our yard, but that's what he loved, and now I do that, because before he took care of the outside and I pretty much took care of the inside. Now I got to do it all.
Right.
But I feel closer to him when I'm doing the yard work or when I'm cutting trees. Sometimes I still get mad at him because it's like, you would be doing this instead of me. As an example of something the other day, and it was just so sad. we live on a really busy street, and my young neighbor texted me a sandhill crane had been hit and killed, and it was right across from her driveway. So I went out there and I told her, I said, I'll come and get it. I have my neighbor's cart, and I'll bring them over, and I'll bury it in the backyard. And so I went and got everything, and gloves, and put it in a cart, and came back home. And I'm digging the hole in the backyard down by the lake. And I'm like, honey, this is not my job. This is your job. You're supposed to be doing this, not me. You know, and it's things like that. But, yeah, there's too much of our life that is there, and I would feel like a huge piece of me would just be ripped apart if I left.
And I think that's something that people don't understand about us. Like after Patrick's death, I was told, donate his clothing.
Right.
And I remember, saying to Evan, it's like I'm giving my son away. Like I can't do this. It took me, which is why I marveled at you are still there, because I'm with you. I understand that connection. Like this was Patrick's home. This is the last home he lived in before he died. So yeah, I understand completely. It would be like, and I hear this from Kira a lot. Like Kira could not stay in their apartment anymore. Like they moved, back to, their family home, before she was in the apartment. And of course it's different, so as we know, it's different for everybody.
But like you said, I mean, for a lot of people that is true. Actually, in February, we had a 17-year-old student here in Pasco County who took her life. And it was a similar situation. She hung herself from a tree in the backyard of the family home. And she has 3 siblings. They were all teenagers. And her mom. And they couldn't go back.
Right.
And they reached out to our foundation, and we worked with them over several months to help find them a new place to live, because they couldn't go back. And actually, they pretty much left everything. They had a family member go and get clothes, things that, that they absolutely needed, but they couldn't do it, And in the process of us even helping them, I told my team, I said, I can't go to that house.
Right.
I said, if we do whatever we're going to do to help them with the foundation, somebody else is going to have to do that part of it, because it's too close.
Right.
And which is kind of weird because, I'm living in the same place where my husband took his life. I walk by that tree all the time, but I could not do that part if we had to, and fortunately, things worked out that we didn't have to do that part. And, it's, I think it happens more often than it doesn't happen.
It's amazing how people wonder, again, how do we get through this? I remember someone telling me, you're a master internalizer. I had to think, and of course, I'm sitting back and, being in the field, I'm like, I know what that means. I really know what they're saying. But we have this, I think a lot of it, I don't want to speak for the masses, but, and what, I know about each other, somehow or another, we have mastered the ability to compartmentalize the tragedy from the awareness and work that we feel needs to be done to bring awareness to this situation.
Well, and it comes out of our experience, because neither one of us would have chosen this.
No.
I mean, I was preparing for my husband to retire, and continue to run my business. That's what I saw, the future being. Now, and in reality, I knew that I was going to lose him at an earlier age, probably, than most people, and not because of this. My preparation through, pretty much our whole life was because of his MS and dealing with his MS. That's how I was going to lose him. And I had dealt with that for so many years I could do that. Not this.
Oh, I'm with you. Like with Patrick, Patrick was an amazing roommate. He was like, he's 33 and he still lives at home. And I'm like, yeah, he's 33. And he used to look at me and goes, I'm 33 and I still live with my mom. And I was like, yeah, but you're an okay roommate.
Yeah.
I had this side of the house, he had this side of the house. But I remember, he used to talk to me, he's like, I'm going to move out someday. And I'm like, okay, parents,
Right.
We
Right.
battle with our kids sometime. And I used to look at him and say, son, I'm looking forward to the day when I have the house to myself. But
Not
to
that
echo
way.
you, not like
Not
this.
like this. Exactly.
And so I have the urn with his ashes on a pot shelf in my living room. And every morning
Okay.
I say good morning. Every evening I say good night. Swear he's in the house.
Right.
I jokingly tell people, although I have a ghost in my house. His name is George. Now it's George and Patrick.
Right.
That guy, sit down and leave me alone. Kind of thing. But yes.
Well, I can't believe this time has gone by so fast.
know.
I mean, really. I mean, when we were talking for 2 hours last night.
I know.
So,
Talk about the purple folder.
we need to talk about briefly our purple folders. This was through the Bobby White Foundation. We developed these folders to give to lost survivors as soon after a suicide as possible. And it came from us not having this information. It's hard to get this information. And sometimes you're not ready for it. But at least we have them and they're available. You can go to our website. You can call me. We've mailed them across country. So this was our first grant funding for the Bobby White Foundation, which again was started in honor of my husband, Bobby White. We founded it in July of 2018. And this has kind of been a tough hour, but we got through it
We
pretty
did.
good. Not too many tears, close, close a few times.
Choked him back.
But we have, we're going to bring people on. We're going to bring other organizations on that deal with suicide, people who have experienced our, kind of losses, people who feel that way. So come back. This is going to be a weekly thing. And remember, there's always hope.